The Mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto. On 3rd of January 2009, an anonymous software developer named Satoshi Nakamoto made history by releasing the Genesis block, the original block containing the first 50 bitcoins onto SourceForge. Unlike any of the blocks that came after, Nakamoto left a message in the block saying, "The Times, 3rd of January 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." That line comes straight from the headline of a London Times article dated the 3rd of January 2009, which details banks being bailed out by the British government. While Nakamoto never clearly stated the meaning of the message, many have interpreted it as a reference to why he developed Bitcoin, to cut out the banks and middlemen that he saw as being corrupt and unreliable, electing to create a more people-driven currency. The origin of the Genesis block is as shrouded in mystery as Nakamoto himself, with questions remaining about why the bitcoins within the original block remain unspendable, why the subsequent block took 6 days to mine, and why people still transfer Bitcoin into the Genesis block. Also known as Block 0, it is the ancestor that every other Bitcoin block can trace its lineage back to, since every Bitcoin traces back to the past one. Nakamoto mines the original block on a CPU, as opposed to the specialized graphics cards miners use today. He did it without any competition, since nobody even knew it existed at the time, and it wasn't worth anything anyway, at least in fiat terms. Back then, Bitcoin was more of an experiment than anything, and it would still take around a year before it started to catch on. It would be incredibly easy for current Bitcoiners to solve these blocks, which were set at a difficulty of 1, a far cry from the current Bitcoin difficulty of 5 trillion. The next block, known as Block 1, wasn't mined until 6 days later, on January the 9th. This is considered odd, as the average timestamp gap between blocks is 10 minutes. There are a few theories regarding the delay. Some have theorized that Nakamoto spent 6 days mining the original block to test out the Bitcoin system in order to make sure it was stable. Then he backdated the timestamp. While spiritual followers believed that he intended to recreate the story of God's rest after creating the world in 6 days. Let me know what you think in the comments. While the original Genesis block contained 50 bitcoins, people have been sending to that address in tribute of Nakamoto since the early days of the system. It's unknown if Nakamoto's intent was to let the 50 bitcoins in the original block be spendable, or if it was an oversight. But the Genesis block, which has become synonymous with Nakamoto and exists as both the backbone of the entire project and as a kind of shrine for fans of Nakamoto to throw their bitcoins into, kind of like a wishing well. The Genesis block remains, for many Bitcoin devotees, the key to identifying Nakamoto himself. The idea is that only Nakamoto would be able to use the private key associated with the block, and other earlier blocks to sign a message. If someone was able to sign messages using the private keys of the original blocks, it would offer solid evidence that they are Nakamoto. Nakamoto mined bitcoins for a few years after creating the Genesis block, and because he had little competition and the original blocks had 50 coins within, he easily became the largest holder of Bitcoin, a title which he keeps to this day, with an estimated 1 million bitcoins, worth an estimated $6.147 billion at today's value. Nakamoto hasn't moved his coins since disappearing entirely in 2011, and never made any effort to cash out even before disappearing. There are 5 reasons why that are often floated on cryptocurrency discussion forums. Number 1, Satoshi is dead. 2, he cannot sell them without risking his anonymity. 3, he lost them. Either his machine crashed, or because of a reinstall. 4. He treated the early mined coins as test data and then deleted them. Or 5. If Satoshi starts selling his Bitcoin, the market could crash. If the public believes that Satoshi has lost faith in Bitcoin, then everyone's going to want to sell too. Whether or not he really has 1 million Bitcoin is debatable. This is the number of early coins that were mined. And the assumption is that only Satoshi was the one mining. To date, nobody really knows which addresses Satoshi really owns. It's all just educated guesswork. Nakamoto's disappearance is generally a calming absence for Bitcoin miners, because if he ever decided to return, it could wreak havoc on the entire infrastructure. Basically, should he ever have the whim, he could theoretically flood the market with his 1 million Bitcoins, essentially annihilating the worth of the currency by introducing so much of it into the system that it could become so abundant and therefore worth less. Nakamoto remains a complete mystery to this day. Whilst his creation Bitcoin climbs further into the mainstream, more and more attention is given to the hints that he placed in the original Genesis block. Make sure that you give this video a thumbs up if you appreciated the content, and do subscribe to my channel for more videos like this.